Eddie Chavez, Ruben Nava, and Jesse Romero. Jesus 911.
Welcome to Jesus 911 on Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Happy Ascension Thursday to everybody. Jesse, good morning. We are a two-man
Morning
car.
for duty, sir.
All right. Jesse, I'm pumped up. It's Ascension Thursday. It's a holy day of obligation in the church, but certain dioceses, they'll move it till Sunday, unless you're one to the Latin rite. But and in that case, they'll celebrate it today. But
Ruben, there's something different about the Latin Mass, the Latin rite regarding Ascension Thursday. Can you share one of the traditions that they've held on to?
Yeah, Jess, I was going through this week. It's something known as the Rogation Days. I know we've talked about Ember Days in the past.
Yep.
But this is I'll just read it here from my missal. Rogation Days are taken from the first 3 days before the Ascension Thursday. And let's see, earthquakes and other calamities afflicted the Diocese of Vienna in Dauphine, France in the 5th century. And Saint Marmaritis, who was bishop of that diocese, instituted a penitential procession with public supplications on the Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday before Ascension Day. In 816, Pope Leo III introduced it into Rome, and soon after, it became a general observance throughout the church. And the Litany of the Saints and the Psalms are prayed, and they're sung during the procession, and on these days after supplication, hence the name Rogation Days, rogare in Latin, rogare, which means to ask, applied to them. So the object of these rogation supplications is to appease the anger of God and avert the scourges of his justice and pray for the harvest. And a similar function is observed on April 25th on the Feast of St. Mark, but this was of Roman origin. It's called the Greater Litanies, in contrast to the Lesser Litanies of the Rogation Days, but in practice, there's really no difference between them. And again, Justice is not something that Vatican II took away, but when the liturgy was changed, they left it up to the local ordinary to decide how he will go about doing these things. And
it fell into disuse.
Disuse, right? Like you always say, Jess. People take the path of least resistance.
If you lower
right?
the bar, people are going to take the path of least resistance.
That's right,
Because that's just human nature.
And
so if you say, for example, you don't have to wear veils any longer. Well, people are going to take the path of least resistance and say, you know what? It's just easier not to grab the veil and put it on and look for it in my drawer and stuff. Again, it's just, I don't know about you, Ruben, but I think Christianity, we should always raise the bar, not lower the bar. That's my opinion.
Absolutely. And if you get a chance, you should you take a look at the litany. So this is it's a long, lengthy litany of all the saints and beautiful prayers in the Rogation Days. So anyway.
Let me just mention something real quick about today, Ascension Thursday, just a little biblical teaching.
All right.
So so where do people go when they died? This is according to Jewish thought, Old Testament. When people died, they went to a place called Sheol. Sheol, that's a Hebrew word. And Sheol, it means the place where the dead congregate. That's what Sheol means. The place where the dead congregate. Sheol also means in Hebrew, underneath the earth. Sheol also means the land of the dead. So that's the Hebrew notion. Now, so where did Jesus Christ, when he died, his body was laid to rest, where did his spirit go to? Well, the Bible tells us that he went to go preach to the spirits that were in prison. He went to go preach to the spirits that were in prison in the first letter of Peter. But today specifically, Ascension Thursday, what happened today? You could find that in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 8 and 10. It's going to describe basically that when Jesus ascended after 40 days on earth, that he opened the gates of heaven and brought the righteous souls from Sheol to heaven with him. Here's what it says in Ephesians. Quote, When he, that's Jesus, ascended on high, he led a host of captives. What? A host of captives. Some translations say a host of prisoners. From where? Okay, that he's taking them from Sheol to heaven. It says he led a host of captives. He gave gifts to men, in saying he ascended. But what does it mean? But that he had also descended into the lower parts of the earth. The Latin word there is the inferior regions of the earth. That's Sheol. Okay? He who descended is he who also ascended far above all the heavens, that he might fill all things. Close quote. So Jesus Christ, when he descended into Sheol, he came to take the souls that were captive in Sheol, the righteous souls. Because in Sheol, you also had damned souls. Sheol, according to the Jews, it was separated in half. You had Sheol, the place of the righteous dead, Sheol, the place of the unrighteous dead. And there was a chasm, as Jesus says in Luke chapter 16. There was a gulf that separated the saints from the damned in Sheol. Well, Jesus, he went in his spirit, as St. Peter says, to take captive the prisoners that were in Sheol, the place of the righteous. And on Ascension Thursday, he opened the gates of heaven and brought the righteous souls of Sheol to heaven with him. That's what we celebrate today.
Good explanation, Jess. Thanks for pointing that out, because that's a misconception when we say the Apostles' Creed. We say he descended into hell, and so a lot of people think, what's he doing in hell?
Yeah, the Latin is he descended into the inferior region.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, good teaching there. Jess, we're going to talk about the story of a hero and a coward. Two Catholics, and they couldn't be contrasted further from each other. I mean, just unbelievable. It's things that have been in the news in the last couple weeks, and we've talked about them.
And Ruben, it's funny. Let me just mention something, and that's what we're going to see right now is when a Catholic walks away from his faith, from the fullness of truth, they not only become dumb, they become evil.
Yeah.
They have because to walk away from Christ and his church is such an act of arrogance and pride that now they're bombarded. Now their concupiscence is raging, their fallen nature is raging, and they step into the evil zone now, as we're going to see in this article.
Yeah. Well, by this time, most people have seen the video of the Pennsylvania State Representative Brian Sims. He was bullying an elderly lady, praying a rosary in front of a Planned Parenthood and protesting, the abortion. But few have heard the incredible heroism of Kendrick Castillo, who sacrificed his life to protect his fellow students at STEM School in Highlands Ranch, Colorado. That's not far from Columbine, Jesse, by the way. Both incidents happen around the same time. However, comparing their stories will provide a powerful example of the strength of Catholic faith over the weakness of the modern religion of social justice. That's what we hear all the time coming out of from our leaders, social justice.
And from liberal Catholics, Ruben.
Yeah. It also illustrates the disparity between the media's treatment of the two cases, which can't be, forgotten. And so who's Kendrick Castillo? Was that senior? He was 3 days away from graduation. He was present when two other students, 16 and 17-year-old students, came to school with intentions of mass murder. And I'll just tell you, those students, they have a dark past, Jess, and I don't know if you looked into them, but one was a bleeding heart liberal trashing our president and promoting Obama and hating on Christians, and he's praising Obama in a lot of his articles. And then the other one was a transgender. They thought it was a little boy, but it was a girl going through a change. So both had mental issues, and so both
mental
of them,
issues and sin issues.
Liberal, and so it wasn't our gun-toting, right-wing people that the media would like to have you believe that kill these students. Yeah. So anyway, as these people embarked on the school. One of them was subdued by school security, and the other was stopped by Kendrick and some friends, and thus saving many lives. Kendrick, however, was killed during the attack, and immediately he was rightfully acclaimed a hero by other students, his parents, and those of the media that cared to tell his story. Jess?
Ruben, this, again, you can't juxtapose these guys any better. I mean, this is the total contrast of Catholics. Now we go to Brian Sims, okay? Brian Sims represents the 182nd District in Pennsylvania House of Reps. Fallen away Catholic. He's openly homosexual and was first elected back in 2012. And he appears to have made a hobby of filming himself as he harasses women who pray in front of abortion centers. That's a real tough guy. And so at the time of Kendrick's sacrifice, this brave senior in high school who was awaiting his graduation, this other coward, Brian Sims, was posting 2 of his films that went viral as he shouted insults at an older lady praying a rosary and offered viewers $100 if they might identify some protesting teenagers so that they might be later harassed. Again, both men were raised Catholic, and both men could not be further opposite ends of the spectrum. We'll continue talking about courage and chivalry, or courage and cowardness, juxtaposing these 2 men.
All right. Don't chase that down. We'll be right back.
This is Terry Barber inviting you, all the men, to a men's conference June 15th at the Sacred Heart Chapel. This is going to be a day where we're going to talk about true masculinity. You know, there's a problem in the Catholic Church today. We have very few men who love the Catholic faith. And I know a lot of the wives that I'm listening to right now saying, I want my husband to be on fire for the faith. Send him to the men's conference. Your son, send him to the men's conference by going to virginmostpowerfulradio.org or call 877-526-2151. That's June 15th. When your husband comes back from this conference, or your son, they're going to have a different view about their Catholic faith, because they're going to meet 3 men who love Jesus and his bride, the church, and are going to instill in them a love for Christ and his church, the Eucharist, Our Lady. Bring them to virginmostpowerfulradio.org. Sign up there or call 877-526-2151. Full sheen ahead.
It is only because of your continued prayers and generous donations that Virgin Most Powerful Radio can broadcast live each weekday. We count on your spiritual and financial support because you understand the urgent need for Catholic programming that shares the gospel with clarity and charity, but without compromise. Please prayerfully consider becoming a monthly donor. You can set it up with the touch of a button on our website, catholicrc.org.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Jesus 911. If this call is not an emergency, dial 888-526-2151.
Jesus 911, 2-man car. Our call sign is John 3:16, giving you some Catholic intel, some Catholic briefing for your day so that you can go out and evangelize the world. And we're talking about a hero and a coward in this article. And, you know, it's not the time to be sheep as Catholics. We got to rise up. And
Yeah, Ruben, you got three types of men: wolves, sheep, and sheepdogs. Representative Sims, he's a wolf. He's a bad man. People that are checked out, that don't get involved in their faith, don't get involved in voting properly, they don't care about society, they just want to sit back on on their couch and watch Netflix and scratch their belly and fart. Those guys are sheep, okay? Those guys are sheep. And then this young guy that gave his life, this high school kid, Kendrick Castillo, he's a sheepdog.
Sheepdog. You know? That's right.
That's right. In fact, I wrote about it in a book. It's called Catholics Wake Up. I'm holding it up right now. I wrote about the whole theology of wolves, sheep, and sheepdogs right here. Give you all the biblical data. But yeah, Ruben, let's continue with the story here.
Okay, so LifeSite News, a very good
resource. Yep.
Yeah, very good. They come out with some great articles. They presented Kendrick Castillo as being actively engaged in the charitable work of his father's Knights of Columbus Council. His friend Cece Bedard described his dedication, saying, "He told me he wanted to be a knight because he wanted to help not only people, but also his community." He was plugged in, Jesse. He was active in his faith and doing some charitable work. I know the Knights do some good stuff. Wow. The Denver Archbishop, Samuel Aquila, he said that he wasn't present at the time of the incident, but he described Kendrick as a young man who followed Christ and laid down his life for others. You know, that's what Jesus says, no greater love than he who lays down his life for his friends. And, one of the news reporters came out and said that there was people who told him that Castillo died as a hero. He faced the gunman. He was seeking to save the lives of his companions. And classmates confirmed that Castillo lunged at the gunman who entered her British literary class, giving us all enough time to get underneath the desks, to get ourselves safe, to run across the room to escape. That's what his fellow students were saying about him. So it's no mistake. He wasn't. He didn't just get hit by gunfire. He was actively trying to put down the threat, and by golly, he took a round. And anyway,
right, Ruben. There is no greater love than this, according to Jesus.
That's right.
And most. I mean, let's just be honest. Most people, when they see gunfire, are running away from gunfire. The only people that are trained to run towards gunfire are troops and cops. Okay, they run towards gunfire. But this is a senior in high school. Most people in high school, they hear gunfire, they're going to run the opposite direction, and rightfully so. They're not trained, they're not armed. But this guy, this senior in high school, Kendrick Castillo, did what a trained cop or a trained troop would do. He ran towards gunfire, putting himself in harm's way, and trying to disarm the gunman. Ruben, this is an act of courage and chivalry on steroids, man.
Yeah, his father referred to him as his only child, as the best kid in the world. And this guy was into robotics, and he was part of this generation where they built a lot of high tech stuff. And he even took an internship at this company. They loved him, Jesse. They hired him, as a matter of fact. And he had some great plans to do some great things in college and going forward in life. So it's a great tragedy. But contrast that to this knucklehead Rep Sims, and he's got a distant relationship from the church. He's in his interview on Religion News Service, he described the role of religion in his upbringing. He says, "My parents raised us generically Irish Catholic, Christmas and Easter Catholics. And when he was about 16, he stopped going to church with his family. He says, I don't remember what prompted it, but one Christmas Eve, my parents asked me if I wanted to go. I said, I don't. And they didn't put up much of a fight." Well, his parents have a lot to answer for.
A lot to answer for, yeah.
He's only 16 at the time. He's living under the roof. So that guy shouldn't have had an option. So, but he appears to be proud of the fact, Jesse, that he's the only elected official in Pennsylvania that didn't have to set foot in a house of worship to get elected. That's
bragging about it.
Yeah, the attitude is amplified by a statement from his video on USA Today. When he went out and he told the lady praying the rosary, "Shame on you," he said, marveling at the amount of mental gymnastics it must take to think that you have a right to tell a woman what's right for her body and yet support a faith that has molested children across the planet. He said that to her, if we recall the video. The same man showed no moral decency as he followed the woman around. She was quietly praying her rosary and called her disgusting, shameful, and even an old white lady. His cowardice in harassing the teenage girls is also telling.
Ruben, that's the height of cowardness. You're following an older lady around as she's praying a rosary and calling her names. That's about as macabre and as dark as you can get. And I'm going to tell you why he does that. He's a practicing homosexual. He's steeped in mortal sin. He's a secular humanist. He's abandoned the Catholic faith. And what happens, he's a classic example of what happens, is that sin makes you spiritually sick. And what does it do? The first thing that sin does, it darkens your intellect. And another way of saying it, it makes you stupid. When you embrace sin, especially mortal sin, unrepentant, unconfessed mortal sin, your intellect becomes darkened and the truths of the Catholic faith become obscure. You can't see them clearly. You have a diminished capacity to understand right and wrong when you're steeped in unconfessed, unrepentant mortal sin, and you walk around in a state of confusion. Your moral compass is broken, and this is a classic example of what happens to a Catholic that walks away from Jesus and the sacraments.
And Jesse has that indelible mark on his soul from his baptism. So inside, he has to be miserable because he knows right from wrong from the beginning, but yet he chose to depart from that. So I have to believe that his conscience is bothering him, and then he tries to make himself feel better by poking fun at people and what they're doing, and or in their sin, like he was pointing out the sins of our church, but he doesn't, he doesn't look at himself. He doesn't see the log in his own eye.
Ruben, the sins of our church at present moment are the sin that he's participating in. It's the sin of sodomy.
That's right.
That's the problem right now in the Catholic Church. It isn't pedophilia, child molestation. That's media spin. We've got a homosexual problem in our church and in our society. And this guy's Exhibit A right here, Representative Sims.
That's right. And what's found fascinating is the National Public Radio. They were the ones who just recently told their staff to not be able to talk about babies in the womb. Don't say that they're babies, and don't refer to them as humans. And so they got caught up in the whole political abortion issue. But they said in the wake of Castillo's death, they look themselves as like the self-appointed keepers of social morality. And they went on to say, we don't want students thinking that the right thing to do is to be a hero. We want students thinking that the right thing to do is to follow safety protocols. And this lady, she went on to counsel against seeing young men like Mr. Castillo as heroes. So we don't want to honor their lives, their sacrifice, but we do not want to sensationalize the idea that this is a good thing to do. We're walking a very tricky line. Unbelievable. That's a hardcore left liberal right there, Jesse. Don't want to give credit where credit is due. This guy saved lives. They're quick to point out when somebody is a coward and runs from this, but the fact that this guy ran towards the gunfire and they're not crediting him, it's unfathomable to me.
And what's funny? It's also when something bad happens in society and the guy happens to be Catholic, they mention that he's a Catholic. Yeah. But when somebody does something heroic in society and they're Catholic, the media seems to omit the fact that he's Catholic. Like this young kid was raised in a Catholic family and was probably a practicing Catholic himself, from all appearances. And Ruben, going back to Coward Sims, the representative from Pennsylvania. This guy, again, that's what happens when you're steeped in mortal sin. Okay? Even your will becomes weakened. St. Thomas says, in the face of a decision to do something godly or something evil, you generally choose what's wrong because your will has been weakened through so much habituated sin. And this guy Sims, instead of being apologetic when he got caught, he doubled down. he went on social media and he began saying, quote, "Bring it on,
Yeah.
Bible bullies. You are bigots, sexist, and misogynist, and I see right through your fake morals and your broken values," close quote. I mean, this is what happens when the sin of pride has just completely overrun your ability to reason and to think. Again, sin darkens your intellect. It weakens your will. Sin disorders your passion. Sin increases concupiscence. And ultimately, unrepentant, unconfessed mortal sin will send you to hell. And I hope this guy repents before he has his exit interview with Jesus.
Yeah. And then on another front here, you've got the internet search was done, and NPR did not cover the Sims case on the national level, but a couple local affiliates did. But both outlets attempted to appear objective, but their biases showed through. Both were careful to identify those who objected to Sims' behavior as Republican or conservative. Just like you said, if they're using it as a pejorative in this case. And then one of the stations gave Coward Sims the last word. He said, the last 5 paragraphs of the story, it concluded with Rep. Sims responding to the online, like what you said, bring it on, bullies.
The diatribe, yeah.
Yeah, that whole thing. And, so fake news, right, Jesse? As Trump says, fake news.
Absolutely. President Trump is absolutely right when he coined that term. And he's the first president. I mean, we've known this for years, Ruben. There's even a study done in your alma mater, UCLA. I have it here in my computer. UCLA did a study, their political science department. They did a study on the media, the 20 major media outlets in the U.S., to see if they were liberal or conservative. Of the 20 major media outlets, all the big channels, CNN, Fox News, ABC, NBC, and the big papers, New York Times, LA Times, Chicago Tribune, the 20 engines of this country that give us information, UCLA study says 18 are decidedly liberal and 2 are conservative. 18 are liberal, 2 are conservative. If that doesn't tell you everything you need to know, I don't know what does.
That's the deep state. It's part of the deep state. Okay, well, we're going to finish up the story on the other side of the break, and then we're talking about what's going on in California with SB 360. Change that dial.
This is Terry Barber inviting you, all the men, to a men's conference June 15th at the Sacred Heart Chapel. This is going to be a day where we're going to talk about true masculinity. There's a problem in the Catholic Church today. We have very few men who love the Catholic faith. And I know a lot of the wives that I'm listening to right now saying, I want my husband to be on fire for the faith. Send him to the men's conference. Your son, send him to the men's conference by going to virginmostpowerfulradio.org or call 877-526-2151. That's June 15th. When your husband comes back from this conference, or your son, they're going to have a different view about their Catholic faith, because they're going to meet 3 men who love Jesus and his bride, the church, and are going to instill in them a love for Christ and his church, the Eucharist, Our Lady. Bring them to virginmostpowerfulradio.org. Sign up there or call 877-526-2151. Full sheen ahead.
It is only because of your continued prayers and generous donations that Virgin Most Powerful Radio can broadcast live each weekday. We count on your spiritual and financial support because you understand the urgent need for Catholic programming that shares the gospel with clarity and charity, but without compromise. Please prayerfully consider becoming a monthly donor. You can set it up with the touch of a button on our website, catholicrc.org.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites The Terry and Jesse Show. and they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Jesus 911. If this call is not an emergency, dial 888-526-2151.
Jesus 911, two-man car, iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. We're going to finish up this story, and we'll move on to another one. But Jess, the last part of this article
It's good.
Yeah,
It's a good wrap up. The
It is.
concluding.
Go ahead, Jess.
It says this: on the surface, the stories of Nicholas Castillo, this is the brave senior in high school that ran at a gunman, and Brian Sims, the cowardly Democrat politician, have little to do with each other. Taken in tandem, they reveal modern attitudes towards virtue. Let's remember, both of these guys are raised Catholic. The chivalric virtues of Nicholas Castillo, this high school senior that ran at a gunman, caused concern lest others follow his self-sacrificing and noble example. The cowardly Brian Sims, social justice warriors, harassments cause no concern but are treated as examples of defending women's rights. The two men represent two worldviews that are engaged in the nation's culture war. In this case, the pro-abortion side brutally revealed itself through Brian Sims, while those that admire self-sacrifice and virtue can praise the heroic actions of the high school senior Kendrick Castillo. Wow, what a summation! That's a perfect concluding remark from this writer here, from this reporter. You couldn't juxtapose two people. Nicholas Castillo, I'm sure he comes from a pro-life family, practicing Catholic family, because only a pro-life ethic would even give you that type of wherewithal, that type of courage to charge a guy with a gun when you're unarmed to try to. Because if you're pro-life, you're going to say, you know what? I got to save lives. It's all about saving lives, and I'm going to put my life in harm's way because I'm bigger, I'm stronger, I have a chance. These 11th, 10th graders don't have a chance against this guy. I have a chance. He has a pro-life ethic, where this other guy, Sims, this is classic pro-abortion ethic. They talk smack. They're angry. They promote violence and harassment. And this is the classic example of the divide in our country right now, Ruben.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, Jesse. And this guy may have died, a martyr's death. He's practicing his faith and saving lives of other people. And then these coward, also these students are cowards for going at fellow students with weaponry, and it's shameful too. On the other hand, with Sims, the guy just needs to get a life. He needs a lot of prayer, but this is what's going on in our world. That spiritual warfare that you and Eddie always talk about. This is exactly what's going on. They're in some dark places. These liberal politicians.
Exactly. Again, sin, it dulls your intellect and it makes you stupid. You lose wisdom. Whereas grace, it elevates the soul. Grace elevates the intellect and the will towards God. In other words, grace gives you wisdom. And it also gives you all the other gifts of the Holy Spirit, one of them being courage or fortitude. And we saw this in spades in this young man, Ruben.
That's right. Hey, Jess, you ready to go on to this other article?
Yeah, let's move on. Let's move over to California. Yeah, what's going on in California, Ruben? Archbishop Gomez is weighing in against the politicians. That's good to see.
So a bill was submitted, a Senate Bill 360. I wonder if that's done on purpose. 360, about face, right?
Interesting. I didn't catch. Yeah, I
just thought.
You're right.
Yeah.
I like that.
So their goal is to try to nail the Catholic prelates that have doing some bad things to young people. And but the way they go about it is completely wrong. And the Catholic people, we petitioned to our senators, our state representatives, and so they amended this bill. But Archbishop Gomez's statement on the amendments to California, the confession bill, and it's not called the confession bill, but that's what they're, it's in quotes, the confession bill. So, the senators heard the voice of the Catholic people, he says, who understand that confession is a sacred space, an intimate dialogue between the believer and the living God. And we know that government, for whatever reason, should violate the privacy, that no government should violate the privacy and confidentiality of that sacred conversation. He says, and while I appreciate that the committee accepted several of the church's recommendations to strengthen mandated reporting requirements for clergy.
This is Archbishop Gomez, right?
Yes, right.
Okay.
So they amended SB 360. It still denies the sanctity of confession to every priest in the state and to thousands of Catholics who work with priests in parishes and other church agencies and ministries. So we have to keep telling, no, our state senators to vote no on SB 360. I looked up the bill, and there's a lot of red lines through the parts they redacted, and but they're making the clergy mandatory reporters, which I don't have a problem with that. But and they go through the whole litany of all the mandated reporters, like teachers and cops and firemen and social workers, and so on and so on. So to add the priests to them, I don't see a problem with that. But the way they want to go about implementing it is the issue. So,
Ruben, here's my take. Here are the facts, okay? Because we're a fact-based show. Three retired cops. That's what we call our show, Jesus 911. The facts is that in 2002, when the Dallas Commission and when the U.S. bishops with the Dallas in the Dallas Charter, they instituted this protocol on helping. On reporting sexual predators in the church. As of 2002, when you look every year at the accusations of priests involved in child molestation, it's about 5 to 7 credible accusations a year. So what am I saying? There's over 47,000 Catholic priests in the U.S. You got 5 to 7 credible child molestation accusations a year. I'll tell you right now, you can put right now the Catholic priesthood in terms of child molestation, pit them against anybody else in society, coaches, teachers, counselors, anybody who's involved with kids right now. Ever since that was implemented back in 2002, the Catholic Church has the best record in the last 10 years in terms of cleaning up the child molestation scourge within its ranks. It is minuscule. The problem the church is fighting right now is homosexual predation within the church, not child molestation. We have a homosexual problem in the church, and that's something that nobody wants to talk about. Even AB 360, they're talking about reporting, having priests report the sins of prelates for minors, for children. But nobody's talking about the big pink elephant in the living room, which is we have a homosexual predation problem within the clergy of post-pubescent minors.
That's right. Hey, Jess, there's a Dominican priest who's a canon lawyer, Father Pius Pietrek. He cooperated on an article that was written and published just a few days, actually in April. It says California bill targets Catholic priests, but rights of all religions are at risk. And he has some very good points. And he talks about how the Bill of Rights is supposed to protect people from having to choose between the most sacrosanct part of their religious beliefs and imprisonment. So, and it's we talked about the SB 360, but it says that Priests must choose to either maintain the confidentiality of the sacrament and face possible imprisonment, or to betray that confidentiality and violate his deepest conscience and the laws of God and the Roman Catholic Church. No priest I know would choose the latter. No priest I know either. But anyway, he says that in 1813, the New York Court of General Sessions commented on the Catholic sacrament of confession. This is in 1813, and the government's proper role in respecting the secrecy of the confessional as a part of its constitutional duty to protect religious freedom. It said to decide that the minister shall promulgate what he receives in confession is to declare that there shall be no penance, and that this important branch of the Roman Catholic religion would be thus annihilated. So to decide that the minister shall promulgate this, it would annihilate the Catholic religion here.
Well, that's a perfect assessment, and it doesn't surprise me, Ruben, because this is one of the most powerful sacraments that we have of the seven, and it doesn't surprise me that the devil would use the political system to try to do damage to one of the most effective and most powerful sacraments we have in the church. How powerful is the sacrament of confession? Well, let me quote you the oldest exorcist in the United States, Monsignor John Esseff. He's an exorcist for the Diocese of Scranton. He's been an exorcist for over 50 years. He says this, quote, "The devil hates the sacrament of confession. One confession is worth 100 exorcisms," close quote. So it doesn't surprise me, Ruben, that you have right now the liberal cabal Democrat establishment in California trying to rein in on one of the most powerful sacraments against Satan for the last 2,000 years.
Yeah.
And here's another point that I'll make also. A good Catholic priest is going to tell the penitent that part of his penance is to turn himself over to the police and pay his debt of justice to society, because that's part of what's called restitution. Part of penance is restitution. And the Catholic Church is very big on what's called justice. I'm not talking about social justice. I'm talking about St. Thomas's virtue of justice, which means to give everybody what's due to them. To God, we give justice, adoration. To your wife, you give justice. You give her fidelity. To your parents, you give justice. You give them honor. This is one of the highest virtues in the Catholic Church, and a good priest is going to tell the penitent, you owe society a debt of justice, turn yourself in.
Now do the right thing. All right, we'll be right back. Don't change that dial.
This is Terry Barber inviting you, all the men, to a men's conference June 15th at the Sacred Heart Chapel. This is going to be a day where we're going to talk about true masculinity. You know, there's a problem in the Catholic Church today. We have very few men who love the Catholic faith. And I know a lot of the wives that I'm listening to right now saying, I want my husband to be on fire for the faith. Send him to the men's conference. Your son, send him to the men's conference by going to virginmostpowerfulradio.org or call 877-526-2151. That's June 15th. When your husband comes back from this conference, or your son, they're going to have a different view about their Catholic faith, because they're going to meet three men who love Jesus and his bride, the church, and are going to instill in them a love for Christ and his church, the Eucharist, Our Lady. Bring them to virginmostpowerfulradio.org. Sign up there or call 877-526-2151. Full sheen ahead.
It is only because of your continued prayers and generous donations that Virgin Most Powerful Radio can broadcast live each weekday. We count on your spiritual and financial support because you understand the urgent need for Catholic programming that shares the gospel with clarity and charity, but without compromise. Please prayerfully consider becoming a monthly donor. You can set it up with the touch of a button on our website, catholicrc.org.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show, and they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Jesus 911. If this call is not an emergency, dial 888-526-2151.
Jesus 911, two-man car. Jesse's in the driver's seat. I'm sitting shotgun. We are 10-8, and we're talking about this California bill that targets Catholic priests first. And, it puts all religions at risk. And, Jess, confession is such a sacred thing that, we can't do it on our own. We need the grace of Christ to bring us back to forgiveness, and that's offered in sacrament of penance or confession.
That's right.
And so although
and Ruben, and the grace we receive is called sanctifying grace. If you want to know how powerful that is, the fathers of the church say that when God created Adam and Eve, when God created Adam and he breathed into him a life-giving soul, the church says that the fathers of the church say that was sanctifying grace that Adam received, the first man. That's how it's the life of God in his soul. That's what we receive in confession, the life of God in our soul, so that we can walk in obedience now. Yeah. And Ruben, again, it's the Catechism talks about the way the devil tries to run society using politics. It's in paragraph 407. The devil has a certain domination. And let me tell you something. The devil is using the Democrat Party very powerfully in my lifetime, Ruben, with so many unjust laws that go against Christianity, specifically Catholic teaching. But here's something that I think you'll enjoy, Ruben, because I know Ruben is my Latin Mass only brother. And I love him for it because he's been holding down the fort for 25 years. And I'll tell you one thing, his art, I can't even argue with Ruben anymore. I say, yeah, Ruben, you're right. Yeah, Ruben, you're right. I mean, I've just red pilled the last couple of years, okay? But here's a point that I'll make, giving my brother Ruben credit where credit's due. A Catholic priest can bypass this law in California if it passes, if we scrap the reconciliation rooms that came after Vatican II, where you're face to face with a priest, okay? And we go back to the traditional confessionals where the priest can't see you. Why? Because that way, if the law passes in California, well, the priest doesn't have to report you because he doesn't know your identity. Mm-hmm. But if he sees you face to face and you say, Father, I've been molesting a couple of third graders at the kindergarten that I teach at. Well, if this law passes, this priest is going to be between a rock and a hard place because he knows who you are. If you go back to those old school confessionals where the priest doesn't know your identity, well, how can he report somebody who he doesn't know? And not only that, just a lot of guys tell me, Jess, I don't go to confession because I'm involved in a lot of sexual sin, and I don't want to look at the priest face to face. I don't want to tell a guy who's my age, Father, I've been playing with myself every night watching. I'm embarrassed, Jess. But a lot of guys tell me, but when I find a Catholic church that has those old school confessionals, I'm more prone to go to confession because he doesn't know who I am. So I'm just giving some kudos to the pre-Vatican II confessionals, Ruben.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, Jess, the U.S. Supreme Court said in 1980 that the priest penitent privilege recognizes the human need to disclose to a spiritual counselor in total and absolute confidence what are believed to be flawed acts or thoughts, and to receive priestly consolation and guidance in return. Close quote. The Catholic Church holds that the information received by the priest in confession does not belong to him. It belongs to God alone. So for that reason, a priest is absolutely meaning there are no exceptions forbidden from revealing the sins of a penitent. In fact, a priest who would dare to do such a thing commits a grave mortal sin and is subject to excommunication, by the Roman Catholic Church, which only the Pope may lift. And so there's a seal around the confession that may never be broken by any human authority. And have you been to those confessions where maybe the walls aren't so thick and you could hear them talking? I'm like, I'm sitting on the other side waiting for my
horrible.
turn. I hate that.
I try to cover my ears, Ruben. I don't want to hear anybody.
No, we're not. Yeah, you commit a sin if you start listening to the confession of somebody else. And I'm like, I start praying louder so that I can't hear that. Unbelievable.
No, I hear what you're saying, Ruben, and I'll tell you, this is something that's very disturbing. I don't see the Democrats. Let's just say, Ruben, if the Muslims had some similar practice, do you think the Democrats would legislate some type of law intruding into Islamic religious practices? That's my question.
No, that's easy to answer. No way.
That's an easy one, right?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, as Catholics, the sacrament of confession is here's a story to show you how powerful it is. Even evil people recognize how powerful it is. Okay, Al Capone was a fallen away Catholic, but he was born and raised Catholic. Okay? He lived out there in the Diocese of Chicago, Illinois, back in the 30s and 40s. Well, during the era of Al Capone, the Italian mafia called La Cosa Nostra, they would kill their enemies in one of two ways. If Al Capone liked you, he would allow you to go to confession before he killed you. Okay? But if he didn't like you, Al Capone would hire a hooker, pick you up in a limousine, take you to a nice hotel, have the hooker seduce you, and right before they would kill you, because the hooker would go to the person would go to the room with the hooker, the mafia would wait a couple of minutes, and the mafia would then kick down the door and catch you in the act of either adultery or fornication, and the hitman, Al Capone's hitman, would say to you, as he pointed a gun to your head, he'd say, "You die in mortal sin."
Wow.
Then he would execute you at point blank range.
Ooh.
I heard this story from a 95-year-old Catholic priest in Chicago, Illinois. He goes, I was 25 years old when Al Capone would pick me up. He would honk. All the priests knew. He would honk in front of the rectory and okay, Al Capone's hitmen want us to hear somebody's confession. We would jump in the limousine. We'd take our breviary. We'd put our stole on, and we'd be in the back seat with the guy that's about to get executed. But we know Al Capone liked this guy. We'd hear his confession. Then they would drop us off back at the rectory before Al Capone would execute him. But if he didn't like you, Ruben, this priest told me, he would set you up in sexual sin to make sure you died in mortal sin, and he would execute you. Al Capone knew the gravity of mortal sin, and he knew the power of the sacrament of confession.
Wow.
Drop the mic.
Yeah, that is incredible. I've never heard that story, Jesse. That's great. I mean, it makes for a good movie, I think. Huh? Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Well, it makes you appreciate what we have.
Yeah.
Somebody as evil as Capone understands the power of that sacrament.
Yeah.
In some demented way.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, so this our Catholic identity, this confession is part of our whole Catholic identity, and is a core part of the practice and belief of Catholics. And so for that reason, the courts and the legislatures in the United States have almost universally upheld a priest penitent privilege akin to the attorney-client privilege. So it can't be broken, and so it's important that we keep this seal of confession. We can't, you can't be having the priest try to choose what he's going to do. Like I already told you, he's in mortal sin if he breaks the seal of confession. And I don't think any priest is going to do that. And just like doing police work, when I used to do photo lineups, I said, okay, can you see the person that shot you in this picture? And they look at the pictures, they have all pictures that reasonably represent each other, or they look closely similar to each other. And either he can identify or he can't. And in, like what you were saying earlier, if the priest can't ID you, then there's there's no case, right? There's no case. They can't bring it to court.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't
Ruben,
see
and
it's
here's another point.
unenforceable. There's no way it could be enforceable.
And here's what also bugs me, because there's three people in society that have had that client. You got the doctor-patient privilege.
Yeah,
You
attorney-client.
got the attorney-client privilege, and then you've always had the priest-penitent, or with clergy
Right.
penitent privilege.
Right.
The Democrats have no problem violating something that's been part of this country's tradition, where they've respected that since the beginning of this country for 247 years. We're not talking about, the Democrats aren't talking about making doctors or lawyers, twisting their arm and making sure that they violate their privileged conversations. They're only going after Catholic priests, which once again, it just demonstrates to me the anti-Catholic bigotry found in the Democrat Party. And as Catholics, come 2020 elections, I hope practicing Catholics vote like Catholics, and we vote these people out of office.
Yeah.
These people that are systematically going after the Catholic Church's priest penitent privilege, and these people that are promoting abortion, infanticide, homosexual marriage, euthanasia. The list goes on and on, Ruben. This is the party of death, and they're trying to bring death and destruction into our Catholic Church as well.
Yeah. Hey, Jess, there's every reason. I mean, the idea that they want to the mandatory reporting statutes, that's good. But what happens in this case, there's every reason to believe that the elimination of this privilege, it's going to mean that the perpetrators would simply just not go to confession. So they're not going to be laying bare their soul, and hence they're going to be dying in mortal sin.
Like if most of them go anyhow.
Yeah. The lines are short. Lines are short.
You got the same 5 ladies from the Legion of Mary and the 2 same old guys from the Knights of Columbus every Saturday.
Yeah, Jess, going back to the priest penitent privilege, did you know that there was a deputy at Men's Central Jail when O.J. Simpson, after he whacked all those people, after he was sitting there, and his friend Rosie Greer, who was an ordained minister, came in to speak to him in the little lockup that they had, and a deputy overheard O.J. admitting to Rosie Greer that he had killed his wife and her
Boyfriend.
Yeah. So, but that during the trial, that was suppressed because Rosie Greer was his minister, and so that was never allowed to get into the trial.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So, you've been listening to Jesus 911. It was I think it was a good topic today. Very good topics today. And stay tuned for Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Mashuda. And Jesse and Eddie will be back tomorrow. And also, next week we have coming up a very good guest that you're not going to want to miss on Thursday. And we'll put it out on Facebook. I'm going to have our engineer put it out. You'll see, you'll hear about him. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Saint Faustina's Prayer for Priests. O my Jesus, I beg thee on behalf of the whole Church, grant it love and the light of thy Spirit, and give power to the words of priests, so that hardened hearts might be brought to repentance and return to thee, O Lord. Lord, give us holy priests. Thou thyself maintain them in holiness. O divine and great High Priest, may the power of thy mercy accompany them everywhere, and protect them from the devil's traps and snares, which are continually being set for the souls of priests. May the power of thy mercy, O Lord, shatter and bring to naught all that might tarnish the sanctity of priests. For thou canst do all things. Amen. Virgin most powerful, pray for us.